was always the men that were dominating all the conversations. I was asked a question in a team meeting, and immediately my peer cut me off. How can I actually help this person to rebuild confidence in themselves? They made her re-believe in herself that I believe in her, and I will always have her back. She developed confidence in herself because she was speaking to customers, speaking to prospects. She became my number one rep and still is the number one in everything that she does.
Welcome to the ISP Podcast, where we speak to salespeople about their journeys to help you demystify the profession. Now, today we are joined by Chloe Lasserre, Director of Enterprise Sales for Southern Europe and Northern Europe, should I say, at ServiceNow. Chloe, thank you very much for joining me. Did you want to take a minute just to introduce yourself and give the audience a bit more context?
Sure. Thank you so much, Jordan, for having me today, part of this podcast. I love doing these sessions, getting to know more people, getting to share my story and hopefully inspire some along the way. So hello, everyone. I'm Chloe. I've been living in Dublin for 10 years now, which is wild because I never thought I'd be here for so long. I absolutely fell in love with Ireland, its culture, the beauty of the island, and the people. And of course, there was a lot of Irish luck that followed me and my family, which brought us here and why we're still here.
That'd be great.
I've always had tech somehow that followed me in my life since the beginning. I was born in Paris, and in the early 90s, my dad moved our family to California. So I grew up there for about 12 years, right in the heart of the Silicon Valley. And I remember watching my father working in startups, some really small ones, some bigger ones. And he was completely in his element, very fulfilled in everything that he was doing, working on technology that actually changed the way that we operate in businesses. And my dad was working on projects such as like the VPN, which we all used, today in businesses. And I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to do something like my dad, which is to create, which was to have impact and to be very fulfilled in my career. I didn't know what it would look like, my career, but I did know what I wanted to create for my future family and for myself. And then before getting into tech, I started off in B2C sales at the age of 16 because I wanted to be independent financially. So I'd work over summer. I started at working in a couple of retail stores, like lingerie stores selling underwear, which I don't have on my LinkedIn. And I worked for Orange Telecoms, which is a French telecom company where I was selling SIM cards and the first iPhone that was released, it was iPhone 2 at the time, and mobile contracts for 2 years. But there was a moment that I'll never forget when I was working for this lingerie shop called Princess Tam Tam. It was in south of France. I had sold a lot of products that day to 2 American women who absolutely loved the French lingerie. And I sold a lot that day. And then the next day, the director of the shop said, "Chloe, we'd like to offer you a long-term contract to work with us." And I stood there saying, "Wow, thank you. Thank you very much." I said, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to decline. I don't think I want to be selling underwear for my whole career." And she laughed and she said, "Okay, off you go and build your career." And then I did a business school in France called EDEC in luxury marketing, which brought me to L'Oreal. And I worked for a brand called Urban Decay, a really cool rock and roll brand that I worked for about two years. I was leading merchandising and marketing for them in EMEA and Middle East. Nice. And I was only 24 when they promoted me to manager.
Wow, that's excellent.
Yeah. I probably wasn't ready, right, when I reflect back. But I had the ambition,
Indeed.
For sure, the energy and rebellion in me. I really wanted to conquer and do things. But I remember I had a chat with HR at L'Oreal who told me, "Wow, you've grown so fast in this company. But now things are going to change. It's going to be slower. It's going to take you a long time now for you to progress beyond manager."
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to feel stuck.
Yeah.
So then I moved to a tech startup. They were pretty big on the news at the time because they had just raised capital. Mm-hmm. And I really wanted to work for them. They seemed so much fun. The product they had created is pretty competitive on the market.
Yeah.
So I had written handwritten letters to the founders multiple times, asking them to meet me, and they did. And I got a job with them.
Incredible.
Yeah, I was hired to expand the startup to the UK market. Since I had done a bit of that at L'Oreal, they said, "Great, well, why don't you, bring your skill set and do the same?" And I did everything there. I did sales, marketing, a bit of leadership, I was opening up the UK office. We implemented Salesforce. And then boom, I put it on LinkedIn like anyone would. And Salesforce contacted me a couple of weeks later. And I convinced my now husband, let's move to Dublin. Let's quit everything, quit Paris and our life and our friends and our apartment, and let's come here. Yeah. And I joined Salesforce, had 9 amazing years there where I was a BDR, AE, sales leader, etc. And I decided to make a big pivot in my career after 9 years and say, that's it. I'm ready for something else and to move into real sales leadership. Yeah. What I was doing in Salesforce was biz dev, pre-sales leadership. Now I'm managing enterprise sales.
It sounds like, as you mentioned, tech was sort of in the blood from your dad. He saw the impact and the high energy, the fast pace of the space. And then also moving into sales, which sort of accelerates that pace even more. Were there any challenges you faced when you first joined tech, first joined sales, both sort of industries and professions that traditionally perhaps haven't been the most inclusive of spaces? Were there any challenges that you faced as a female in the industry, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, thanks for raising that, because I think we come with a lot of perspectives and bias, right, about industries. And for example, the cosmetic industry, we think it's very female-led, right, because we obviously sell majorly to women. And when we think about tech, we think about, being in a male-dominated space. But in reality, the technology, they're very open, and they're very, very inclusive, and they embrace differences, which is something that I really liked working in technology. They really, I think when I moved into tech, they appreciated me for who I was, and they were very open to my strengths and also my areas of development. But of course, throughout, if I reflect on the last couple of 12 years that I've been in technology, there has been moments where it's been difficult for me being a woman, a young woman in tech, wanting to, to have a really big career, wanting to be, a director at a young age. I faced challenges. I wasn't always the brightest or the number one, in everything that I did. I did things right. I did things smart, but that's not what made me stand out in my career. I had to lean on my strengths, which weren't always the typical strengths that you would find in maybe an account executive or maybe a leader, which helped me get to where I am today. But yes, there are biases, and yes, there are going to be challenges that anyone's going to face, regardless of gender, right? We all face different challenges that we have to overcome. Yeah. And learning to be flexible, adaptable when challenges arise, and getting perspective and advice by mentors and coaches is really the biggest tip that I could give to anyone who's trying to think about building their career.
Yeah. Yeah. And you spoke there about leaning into your strengths that perhaps weren't the typical strengths that you'd see. And you also before spoke about that desire to create impact. So are you able to share a bit more about how you could bring those two together to really stand out and create that differentiation?
Okay, yes. Well, we'll talk about impact first. Yeah. Creating impact for me personally, right? And when I think about my legacy as a leader, it's about creating positive change on either people, on a team, on a business. That's what I want to be remembered for. And whether I'm not in a certain role at a certain point of time, I want them to reflect and say, well, Chloe has done something positive for us. That for me is creating impact. And not just as a leader, I try to also embrace that as a human being, and then creating impact on others outside of work, whether it's friends or family. But throughout my journey, I was very fortunate to meet great mentors who had a profound impact on me. And they believed in me, especially during moments when I doubted in myself. And they've encouraged me always to go further and further in my career. And I do carry that today as my leadership style, supporting others, thinking about how they can go beyond their role and create impact, whether it's on customers or stakeholders or others around them. But I believe we bring really unique and rich strengths to a table, all of us, whether we are women or men, we bring something unique to the table. For me, what I did is think about when I was creating impacts in my career, and I still do today, I lean on my forces. I lean on an emotional intelligence. I lean on creativity, which is huge for me in what I do outside of work and in work. And there is the beauty of emotional intelligence is being able to create a space where you can analyze body language, attitudes very quickly, and be able to pivot your communication style or maybe pivot certain words to try and build trust further. That for me is how I created impact in my career. And it's something I try and help others do when I coach them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting one. The power of that support network.
Yeah.
To help you analyze and help build that sort of self-awareness as well, that will then allow you to tap into some of those superpowers a little bit more that you shared, which is fantastic. And were there any sort of key moments where you really realized the power of your superpowers and your presence throughout your career?
Yeah, there are a couple points that I can recall where I had to really embrace that superpower. There's one which I can recall. This was a couple years back. I was the only female leader in a division. So my manager was a man and my peer was a man. And we had not a lot of female sales reps on that team. So I represented a small proportion of the female side across that team. And we would have team meetings all together. And often I noticed that the women on the team were very quiet. They wouldn't share their perspective. And it was always the men that were dominating all the conversations. And I remember I was asked a question in a team meeting, and immediately my peer cut me off. I didn't know how to react at that moment. I probably didn't have the confidence or the maturity at the time to say, hold on a second, let me finish my sentence. But I did take about a day to reflect on what had happened. And I had analyzed the room on that moment, on how they reacted. And I noticed that it made everyone feel uncomfortable. That's when I used emotional intelligence and that power to analyze, wow, how did that impact others? And just by simply looking at their body language, they became rigid. I could see some of their faces where they were almost in shock, like, oh, wow, Chloe didn't say anything. Or why was she cut across during the conversation? So I spoke to an exec coach that evening, which is someone I've been working with for a long time. We would catch up weekly. And I remember I told her, I said, wow, I wish I had reacted differently. I wish I had the strength in me to say, hold on, let me finish my sentence. And she said, well, you can take that power back and you can go and have a chat with your peer tomorrow and address it. So I thought about it all night. Like, how am I going to say it to not offend anyone? Because I wanted to make sure that I got a point across which wasn't about me, but it was actually about others.
Yeah.
And I asked, hey, could we have a quick chat the next morning? And he said, sure. And I told him, look, I just want to bring you back to a situation that happened yesterday. So I put him into the context. Yeah. And then I said, this is how it made me feel. It's also how it made others feel. Yeah. And I asked very politely that if we could acknowledge next time when someone's talking, whether it's me or anyone else, to acknowledge, give them the space to talk and let them finish their sentence. And then we can chip in, and give opinions. That person had no clue that they did that. It was done with no harm. They didn't realize. I think this was a very big coaching moment for that person.
Yeah.
But also I remember going back then to my team, telling them, and I had the vulnerability to say it to my team, saying, I know this happened yesterday. I analyzed and noticed that this made you feel this way. Am I right? And they're like, yes, absolutely. We talked about it. And I said, well, this is how I've addressed it. And this is how we need to address this moving forward to ensure that there's equality. There's always going to be a feeling of inclusiveness in the way that we work.
Yes.
That's how I use that superpower of empathy and EQ, but also having the confidence in me to say, look, this is how I felt. This is how others felt.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that first step in creating that really constructive environment, that culture that people want to be involved with. And it drives so many other positives when you can create that environment. So that's an incredible story. I absolutely love that.
Thank
you. Working at large organizations, that can bring about some structural challenges So how do you go about staying truly authentic to yourself, your beliefs, while navigating some of the challenges in terms of structure or bias?
Yeah. And Salesforce, 75,000 employee company, ServiceNow, almost 24,000 employees. They're big organizations I worked for. I only worked for one very small company, which was the startup beforehand. And we were 56 at the time. But I've mostly done my career in large organizations, and there is a lot to navigate when you're working with so many different layers of hierarchy and so many teams around you. For me personally, authenticity starts with being very connected to your values. That's the first step. Knowing your values, knowing your purpose, and the kind of person you want to be at work, whether you are a leader or if you're an individual contributor. That was my anchor in everything that I did when I was growing my career, especially environments where there is so much structure involved. Navigating biases does require a lot of awareness and a lot of resilience, because there's going to be moments where you're going to want to implement a change or create an innovation, but you can't make it happen all by yourself. It takes multitude of influence to be able to actually make things happen in a very, very large organization. The key to navigate your career in these big corporations is to, first of all, be known really well for something. And it doesn't always have to be about the numbers. Like I said at the start, I wasn't the number one seller in Salesforce, but I was very good at knowing what were going to be my difference that I could bring to customers and to the people around me, that then became my blueprint. And knowing for Chloe at work, whether if I was an AE or if I was a VDR or a manager, I had that blueprint. And the blueprint for me was to build a reputation, knowing that I was someone who was authentic, that I was loyal, that I was working really hard, and that I always wanted to create positivity in everything that I did. And that was the first thing I did, was the blueprint piece. And in every presentation I do, I start with that, which is, this is my legacy. It's what I want to be known for. And this is my blueprint. And it does shift with time as you navigate your career in different corporations. It does. But I always ask my teams to think about that. We do a lot of wheels of life exercises where we think about our blueprints. What blueprint are we going to have in work and outside of work? Yeah. The other thing, when you work in these corporations, you need to have a very strong network, but it takes time to build a network.
Yeah.
For example, in ServiceNow, I'm still very new. I'm in four months in the company. I know a couple of people thanks to Salesforce, but I'm still trying to navigate who are going to be the allies that I need to work with for my future in the company. But I already have a good network, but I know I'm going to have to work really hard to develop a really strong network that I can call one day someone at a really high position and say, I need your help here. But in Salesforce, with the experience I'd got and the time that I was there, I had built a network of people I surrounded myself with that believed in me and believed in my vision, believed in my team. And that's what brought me to my last role in Salesforce, which was an incredible role where I led internationally. And there were many moments where there were lows, in my career too, where I noticed that I had gaps, and they were really like spotlight on my gaps, during those times. You need to be so self-aware when you think about how you're going to navigate your career. And it takes vulnerability and so much self-awareness to understand, here's my gaps. Some of these gaps you can work with. And sometimes there are gaps that stay areas of development for a while. And that's okay. You need to also, yes, embrace the strengths, but embrace the areas of development, because careers are not just made up of successes. They'll be made up of moments where you do fail. And when you fail, you become stronger and more resilient, and you learn so much about yourself.
Yeah, certainly. It's really interesting. You spoke about the importance of that personal brand, finding that niche, and then the internal networking to create that support network. And they almost go hand in hand, right? Once you have that thing to be known by, it's a lot easier for people to associate with you because they understand you, your beliefs, your vision, as you said. So it makes that allyship a lot more straightforward, which is great. And then talking about the self-awareness piece, and when you shared your previous example, it was really great to hear that your focus, rather than being on you, was others around you. What impact is that going to have? And that is the most powerful thing that leaders can do, right? Is to use their own strengths to help others rise up and create that environment that is conducive to helping others to grow. So I'd love to go a little bit deeper on a couple of topics there, if you're happy for me to.
Of course.
Bro. So as we've touched on, leaning into your own strengths is really important. You've mentioned mentorship, you've mentioned coaching, you've mentioned team leadership. How are you able to pull on some of those levers, those superheroes, to really enhance the impact that you can deliver in some of those moments?
Yeah. Now maybe what I can start off by saying is the journey that you build in leadership, it really evolves within time. And you do have to pull in multiple different people within your career to be able to think about how you evolve in the right way as a leader. And even my approach, to coaching has evolved within time, moving from, third line and first line and second line and so on. There's so many different aspects of coaching that, and that's the beauty of it all, is that the different dimensions of it all, that you can learn to coach others as you can be coached along the way.
Yeah.
I've had to really embrace the skill of influence, how to influence a team, how to influence a stakeholder, influence a customer, influence a leader, to be able to get things happening. I did a really great enablement a couple years back, which was called the GROW coaching methodology. And it's something I apply not just on teams, but on a multitude of people that I work with, which is getting them to have a breakthrough moment and for us to move forward together in the right direction. Yeah. I use it as much as possible, which is, asking open-ended questions. It's having a lot of deep, active listening and getting them to come up with the answers.
Yeah.
Try not to go in with my opinions and perspectives, because I want them to come up with the answers. And that's something that I use as much as I can. It's a really great technique. I highly, really recommend that anyone who's looking to become a leader one day to think about the GROW methodology, because it's something that's been used for many years now, and it will continue to be used, I think, especially in large corporations.
Yeah. I'll need to take a closer look into it, because it sounds like the onus there is, as you mentioned, not giving the answers, but helping to guide someone to the answers, which really promotes that self-awareness, promotes that emotional intelligence, and drives accountability for what the plan of action looks like. And you've touched on using blueprints throughout your own career and within your teams. Are you able to share a bit more information about that process there? Once that moment of reflection has been realized, how do you then go about really defining that action plan?
Yeah. And I can use a real life example. So recently, right? I joined ServiceNow, brand new team. The first thing, is spending time with the teams, using the GROW methodology to get to know them and what are their motivations. But when you're trying to impact not just people and a team, the role as a leader is to create a vision that everyone is bought in. Repetition is so key in leadership. You have to keep repeating the vision over and over again, that everyone feels that they're part of this bigger picture, and there's this sense of belonging. That is something that, yes, it could be part of, let's say, maybe my leadership blueprint, but it's something that I use to create around high-performing teams. It's a strategy that I use. And every month or maybe every quarter, I will use a vision board to share with my teams, here's the vision, here's how we're tracking towards our vision and our goals, and get everyone involved on the vision. I put champions in. I get people to nominate themselves. Maybe they're really good at a particular topic, and they might be our chief fun officer, or maybe they're going to be the chief process officer. Yeah. And each person contributes to the global vision together. And getting everyone to have that breakthrough moment, like, wait, we can actually do this together and not individually, is a really great strategy that we can use to empower everyone, to make everyone feel accountable. And it helps as well teams really think the bigger picture and not siloed.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. And particularly in sales, which at times and traditionally, historically, has that sort of lone wolf connotation. I certainly don't think that's the case anymore. And, we are really driving towards it being a team sport. So creating that camaraderie, that shared North Star is so important. I do have a bit of a palate cleanser of a question for you. So what's one unexpected thing that you think has made you a better leader? Something that you didn't necessarily learn from a leadership book or a course that you'd run?
And before I became a leader, I did so many courses and read so many books. And Simon Sinek is definitely one of my favorites. And he gave me the right foundations. But there was one moment that I think probably changed forever the way I lead. And it was right at the start of my management journey. I had just joined a business development team as a first line leader. And I had 12 reps reporting into me. One of these reps had a tragic news in the family that had deeply affected her. And her confidence had completely dropped. She had no motivation anymore. And without even consulting at the time HR, I knew what I had to do for that person. That person needed time to heal, to rest, to be close with family, and come back once they were ready. So I made that ultimate decision saying, you're going home and you come back when you're ready. And I remember going to HR saying, look, I did this. I trusted my gut. And they said, you did exactly what you should have done. And that rep came back after about a month or so and said, okay, I'm back now, but I don't know how I'm going to do this. For weeks, this rep was failing. Although I had tried to create frameworks of high performing, I'd learned from theory because I was new to the role.
Yeah.
I had to really dig into the human aspect and not just around leadership. It's how can I actually help this person to rebuild confidence in themselves? I made her re-believe in herself that even though she makes mistakes and maybe she's going to fail on her target, that I believe in her. Yeah. And I will always have her back. And day by day, as she was striving, to hit her goals and hit her targets, she developed confidence in herself because she was speaking to customers, speaking to prospects, speaking to team members. And the more that she was out there, putting herself out there, the more she was learning, the more she was developing confidence in herself. She, months later, became my number one rep, became then the number one account executive, and still is the number one in everything that she does. And all it took was for someone to believe in her. And it wasn't about the numbers. And this is where I thought I was wrong to answer your question. We think in leadership, it's just about driving performance. But it's much more beyond that. To drive performance, you need to drive people. And I've seen so many times leaders who got this wrong. Because when we do theory about leadership, we talk a lot about high performance. And yes, high performance, it's about strategies to get people to perform, to be ultra motivated, to push themselves further, to sell more. I agree. But I've never applied that technique first. Yeah. The technique goes back to understanding the motivations of the people and where can I use their strengths for them to become really good at what they do. And there's so many stories like that I can think of people who just needed a bit of someone to believe in them to get to where they are today. And I had that a lot in my career. People believed in me, which brought me to where I am. So that's something that there's a misconception around management versus leadership because they're very different jobs. Managing businesses, but leading people is different. I think leading people is actually what creates incredible performances across the business. Yeah.
It's as if you knew the next question that I was going to ask, right? As you very eloquently explained, people and people's well-being is a prerequisite of performance. in most cases, if not all cases. So what are some of your go-to techniques for building and maintaining that culture of well-being that inevitably will translate into a high-performing team?
Yeah, and I'm big on this, being as well a young mom. You know, I've my daughter's 2 years old. I only have one daughter, and I'm busy. My husband's busy too, and maintaining well-being, it's critical for me and my family,
Yeah.
more than ever now. And I want as well the people that I work with to feel that they have the space that they can be great at work, but they can also disconnect from work when they need to.
Yeah.
Because sales, we know it's a sacrifice. It's a lot of stress. It's pressure. There's days where sometimes the account executives on my team have to work late at night. They get pressure from me. I get pressure from leadership to get the deal closed.
Yeah.
With that comes the importance of well-being.
Yeah.
The first thing that I do is when we do career conversations and a coaching conversation about their growth and their development, I look at their well-being sphere and I ask them, tell me about your well-being. How would you scale it from 1 to 10? And what do you do that recharges your batteries? So I try to gauge in, first of all, like, where do they recharge their energy outside of work? And do they feel exhausted? And most of them at the end of a quarter will tell me, I'm exhausted, Chloe. And it's thinking about how can I also maybe give a bit of relief sometimes and not always put on the pressure to get the numbers there. And being able to say, okay, well, why don't you finish a bit earlier today? Or it could be an example. Let's not focus just on deals today. Let's focus on something else that brings you joy, brings you maybe a moment where you can recharge those batteries. And it could be something just fun. Some of them like to play ping pong in the office. Yesterday, we did a cooking class with my team and we learned to make pasta. It's having these moments where we can disconnect from work, have fun, celebrate, the wins, also the moments. And, you have to celebrate failure too, because that's how we learn. But I'm very conscious of the well-being space. I don't text them at night. I don't text them over the weekend unless if there's an ultra urgency. But I create boundaries for me and for the others around me that I work with.
Yeah.
And so far, I've been very fortunate to have worked with leaders who were very good at that. So I became good at that too.
I recently had a guest on the podcast that spoke about mental toughness and this idea that in sales, you do have to have mental toughness, but there's often a misconception around what that actually is. And traditionally, it's been viewed as this ability to sort of block things out, right, to be able to move forward, when in reality, it's actually that reflection and that vulnerability to take things in and then make a change that is so important, so impactful, and makes all the difference. So how do you go about encouraging that vulnerability and that reflection within what is a very high pressure environment?
Yeah. I would love to hear the conversation that you had with the person about this, because we take on a lot in these high pressure environments. Our role as a leader is to shield our teams from the noise, but also there's moments where you have to let them in and you need to share with them when there is pressure above. Even last month, it was end of quarter, I created a meeting with my team and I said, if we continue this way, we're stepping into the red zone here because we're losing deals. We're not in control of our deals. And I didn't do it in a way to put more pressure on them. I just said, this is the reality. This is what we're going through. We need to come up with a plan together. Yeah. But I was also vulnerable, saying, I'm having these conversations at this level, and this is what I'm hearing. But I want us to think of a plan together. Yeah. But there's many moments as well where I don't tell them things and I shield them from the noise. Yep. I take on the pressure and I will release the pressure maybe by doing something that brings me, joy or wellness or whatever I might be. It could be reading a book, listening to music, because it's unnecessary to put pressure on teams when it's not needed, and only bring in the pressure when you know that they can take it on at the right moment. But I think when there is a dynamic, when the leader says, we're in this together, the pressure is coming from here. What do we do to navigate this together and think of a plan how we're going to solve this. Everyone's bought in. And even in a high pressure environment, people can still thrive, right? And they can use the stress as something, as a good motivation to move forward versus a stress as being like a demotivator.
Chloe, that's been such an insightful and impactful conversation for myself, and I'm sure it will be for the audience. Final question that I've got for you is, what is the one lesson that you hope sales leaders will take away from this conversation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been asked that question quite recently as well by a leader who wants to move into senior leadership.
Yeah.
And they asked me, like, what is the one biggest key takeaway that you can share? And I told them, leadership is a journey. It's not a destination. There will be made across the journey the highs, the lows, the failures, the successes, which we've talked about. And you never stop learning as a leader, because leadership is as much about understanding yourself as it is about understanding others. And one lesson I wish more people understood is that leadership isn't something that you master, because it's an ever-evolving skill rooted in human psychology, right? We talk about Generation Z now. It's something that we didn't talk about years back. And that means we have to pivot leadership to the new generation. And that's, for me, probably a very big lesson that everyone should take away. It's thinking about, how do you evolve as a leader? How do you adapt and stay flexible? How do you stay modern in your leadership style as well? And remember that it's not a final destination that you get to. It's a journey of so many people that you meet along the way, but you learn deeply about yourself too, along this chapter of leaderships that you discover. But with that, I think there's so much to discover along this journey, and you have to really open your arms to everything that comes with it along that journey.
Yeah. Brilliant. Very nicely summarized there. Where can people follow you, connect with you? I guess LinkedIn's probably the best place, right?
Yeah, LinkedIn is perfect. I get lots of people who message me, who ask me for coaching or for mentorship or advice simply, and I'd love to connect with people. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, it would be an absolute pleasure to get to know them. And yeah, I just say, don't be shy, just send me a direct message.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Chloe. And to everyone listening, until next time. Next week on the ISP Podcast.
My belief was that others had something that I didn't. That the answer to key sales performance is between your ears. Anything that the great sales achievers can do, so can you and I.
Can you pick yourself up? Can you keep yourself going? Self-belief in your abilities, not being frightened to change. Bring all of those together, you get mental toughness.